planning specifically for anaerobic digestion. I'm going to say a little bit about environmental impact assessment, but not very much. And then I'm going to turn to some of the environmental issues that planners have to face when dealing with applications for anaerobic digestion. I should say at the outset, I'm speaking from a waste planning authority's perspective. Much of what I'm going to say will be of equal relevance to the district planning tier, and obviously if we're here mainly in East Anglia in a two-tier planning authority. There are some different issues which I'll pick up as I go through that will apply differently. So I want to start off with planning policy as it is now. As you probably are all aware, with the new coalition government, planning policy is in a considerable state of flux as to what it's going to look like. The coalition has come into power with some fairly radical ideas about how it wishes to change the planning system and to improve it. So I'm going to tell you what it is today, and I'm going to give you my indication of what I think it will be in, say, a year's time. At the moment, we start off at the national level with a whole suite of planning policy statements, the most critical of which are, I think, PPS 1 and in particular the climate change supplement to that. But also planning for sustainable waste management, which is PPS 10. Now, there are a whole host of PPSs which are potentially relevant to waste management, not least of which are PPS 4, which deals with economic development, PPS 7, which deals with development in sustainable development in rural areas. There are specific PPSs relating to renewable energy. There are PPSs dealing with flood risk. The PPS is dealing with biodiversity, and on and on and on. So there is a lot of national planning policy, a lot of which actually I think would be quite supportive of proposals for anaerobic digestion. Below the national planning policy, at the moment, there is the regional spatial strategy, and I'm pleased to see Deborah Sachs in the audience, who was formerly with the East of England Regional Assembly. The regional spatial strategy is still part of the development plan, and as you'll probably know, any planning application that we receive has to be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And as long as the regional spatial strategy is part of the development plan, then it is going to be an important consideration. Although the Secretary of State, Eric Pickles, has already once tried to revoke them and that was found to be unlawful, but has indicated that his letter indicating that the spatial strategies are going to be abolished is a material consideration that can be taken into account in certain circumstances. So you will need to look at the regional spatial strategy. Below that, at the local level, you have local development framework, which is produced by the district councils, and a minerals and waste development framework, which is produced by the county council. And within that, the most important document is probably the waste core strategy from the waste perspective. And Suffolk's waste core strategy, which I think will be the first to be adopted, is due to go to council on this Thursday. So fingers crossed that that gets adopted. And there are also site allocation documents, which are documents which specifically identify sites for particular uses, for particular waste uses. Now, what is it going to be in the future? Now, in the future, all of the PPSs are likely to be withdrawn. Government feels there is too much national policy, and in the spirit of localism, their suggestion is that they are going to set some fairly high-level national planning policies in a national planning policy framework in a single document that will be much shorter, and it will concentrate wholly on policy, and a lot of the guidance will be taken out, and there's a debate going on about how much of that guidance will be retained as guidance to be used and how much will be ditched. As I said, below that, the regional spatial strategy then gets abolished, so the regional spatial strategy will be of no relevance once that happens, and that will happen once the localism bill is enacted. The tier of local development frameworks and minerals and waste development frameworks will remain. So too, therefore, will the waste core strategy and the site allocation development plan documents. And a lot of you will probably have heard that the government's very keen on neighbourhood planning, wants more community engagement, and I'm going to come back to that later as I go through my presentation. At the moment, the indication is that that won't include minerals and waste matters, in the sense that the neighbourhood plans will not be able to deal with allocations for minerals and waste sites because they're seen as being much more strategic facilities. But the ethos of neighbourhood planning and localism, I think, is something that will be relevant in the future. We also need to be cognizant of other policies that are not strictly planning policies, but they're policies which are material considerations that we need to take into account in determining applications. Waste Strategy 2007 is obviously the national DEFRA waste strategy, and you heard from Alex this morning that that's currently being reviewed, so it'd be very interesting to see what the outcome of that will be. You also heard this morning about the Anaerobic Digestion Framework document that's under preparation and the Coalition Government's commitment to increasing energy from waste from anaerobic digestion. So again, that's all positive stuff and also stuff that planning authorities should be taking into account. You might also need to be aware of the joint municipal waste management strategies prepared by the county and district authorities jointly. That obviously only deals with municipal waste, but at least there's some indication in those documents about how the local authorities are proposing to deal with their waste that they're responsible for disposing of, including potentially food wastes. And I just wanted to mention Designing Waste Facilities, A Guide to Modern Design in Waste. It's a guidance document, but it's a useful document for all forms of waste management facilities to try to improve the overall quality of design of some of these facilities, which again I think can be an issue in determining application. So there's quite a good guide out there to be used. Very briefly, I want to mention some of the key objectives in PPS 10 because they are particularly relevant. Obviously, driving waste management up the waste hierarchy. I think we're all familiar with the nature of the hierarchy, but obviously energy from waste and anaerobic digestion in particular is obviously moving waste up the waste hierarchy away from landfill. It talks about communities taking more responsibility for their own waste and also enabling sufficient and timely provision of facilities. I think it's often described as the right facilities in the right place at the right time. It also, as you would expect, ensures that any proposals don't endanger human health or harm the environment. Unacceptably, and that's an Environment Agency objective clearly as well. And also that it seeks to enable waste to be disposed of in one of the nearest appropriate facilities. This is the so-called proximity principle that used to be referred to in PPS 10. The wording is slightly different, but I think it is relevant, particularly in the context of the size of any plant that's being produced and the nature and location and source of the feedstock. So I will come back to that later on. It's silent on technology, and I think we heard that this morning. Doesn't make any. I sort of went through in Word to find if there's any word anaerobic or digestion, and it didn't appear at all in PPS 10. But then nor did any of the other technologies either. Waste Strategy 2007. I won't say too much about this, but I think it sets a background to trying to increase recovery of energy from waste, which can't be reused or recycled. Even then was seen as being an important part of a well-balanced energy policy, and I'm sure that's going to be reiterated and reinforced in the new waste strategy that will come out. Equally, this issue, it's perhaps more relevant to other forms of energy from waste, but the recognition that vigorous energy from waste policy is compatible with high recycling rates. And the government wishes to encourage local authorities and businesses to consider using AD. But again, doesn't think it appropriate to express a preference for one technology over another. And again, it will be interesting to see how that changes in the new version of the document.